This podcast episode is dedicated to empowering sensitive people to recognize their trait as sensory intelligence
and bring their unique gifts into service for the crucial roles we play in communities, businesses, and leadership globally. I'm Julie Bieland, sensitivity expert, psychotherapist, and founder of the online sensitive empowerment community.
I'm Willow McIntosh, founder of Illuminance and leader of the High Sensory Intelligence movement. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Excited about our topic today, and I'm going to have Willow introduce our topic today. Hi, Willow.
Hey, Julie. Hey, everyone. Wonderful to have you all with us. And I'm really excited to be introducing this topic this week, which is all about self-validation. And in a previous episode, we went through the wonderful techniques that Julie has put together, which are around acknowledging our feelings, validating our feelings, and then taking action around our feelings. And I have really been diving into this piece around validation. I tend to get really fascinated by particular aspects of tools and techniques, and I really love to explore and really feel what the value is in there. And this piece around validation really struck me, and I'm so excited to talk about just how important this really is for us as HSPs on many levels.
Love it. And I think you're onto something, because this is a very important piece. And I think so many of us as HSPs, we grow up in lots of situations, I know I did, feeling invalidated for the emotions that we were having, because as being only 20% of the population, and even within that 20%, some of us are people who feel things even more, more extreme. So growing up in a situation where you're told, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, that you're wrong for feeling the way you feel, that kind of messes you up a little bit. So we hope to shift some of that mindset a little bit today, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're so right. That's the piece that's so important here. Yeah, that's right. It's we kind of get it double whammy, because we can be super super sensitive to the kind of criticism and feedback that we get from people, because obviously we're growing up and we're looking to other people to get that kind of validation externally, which is a very natural thing to do as a child, as we're growing up. But also we're highly empathic, so when we're learning to kind of embrace our abilities as HSPs, sometimes that empathic ability can throw us off, and we tend to confuse our feelings with other people's feelings. And also we have a difference. We are fundamentally different to the other 80% in some beautiful ways, and we complement each other very well in the world. However, this can really mess with our self-validation. These things come together as a melting pot, and if we don't have the right guidance and the right mentorship and the right sort of ideas of how to properly understand our abilities and who we are, then it can really throw us off in terms of our sense of self. And this is the piece that I feel is so important for us to shed some light on, and you kind of look at some tools and techniques, but also our experience, Julie, and you and me, Julie, of how our journey around validation has been so important, I think.
My goodness, definitely. I think that's a very, very powerful step in all processes, and that ability to develop that sense of self, and that even in communication, to feel validated in our experience. And I think that's why it's so important for us to be together and be talking about this, because we start to recognize, like, yeah, we actually share similar experiences. And I know for myself, if I think into my own childhood, I think about how, I think growing up always thinking that there's something wrong with how you're experiencing the world definitely takes a hit on your self-esteem, the way that you value yourself. And I know for myself, it made me shrink. I was definitely not flying in empowerment until much later in life. And part of that really was the process of learning how to validate my own experiences. And like we talked about in the last episode, we have to, validation is a part of self-soothing too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And this is what really fascinated me as I really kind of dove into this following the last episode. And it is a very soothing process, and it's a very grounding, expansive feeling of whatever we're feeling at the time. It really helps to kind of dive into it. And on a sort of a day-to-day basis, validation in that sense is such a powerful technique for us to, make sure that we're utilizing on an ongoing basis. But my experience growing up was very similar to yours, Julia. I was really thrown around by what other people thought of me. And because I knew I was experiencing the world differently and I didn't really want to share that, my sense of self was really affected in that way. And that's very much what caused me almost to split my body into two, where I was really just living up in my head and very much a kind of a victim to my thoughts that were happening, and always trying to work stuff out with my thinking. And I really had a total disconnect from my body, from my feelings. And for me, the greatest breakthrough, and I know I've said this a few times, but I feel it's so important. The greatest breakthrough for me was allowing me to experience and acknowledge and feel into my body and my feelings. And that for me was such a huge shift into understanding my sense of self from a much deeper point of view, to actually align with my authenticity and not just this swirling processing in my head.
Yeah, very much so. I love how you talked about like the words grounding and expansive. I mean, that says a lot right there, because if we can be grounded, if we can open up and expand that, and that's part of the experience that we have to really kind of reparent ourselves as adults, in terms of being able to learn how to acknowledge and validate what we experience, because we can't soothe ourselves or practice self-compassion if we're not validating the fact that we're having that experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes, you're exactly right. Otherwise, it kind of, none of it really makes sense. But I think it's also, interesting almost to look at it from a kind of a physiological point of view. It's almost like, well, why do we need to do this validation? What's it actually doing, and why does it soothe, and why does it help make sense of ourselves with our interaction with other people, and obviously, the level of happiness in our lives. And I think, what it's really doing is I believe that we all have a true self. We all have a self that's connected to our hearts, whether we view that as our higher selves, perhaps our soul. It's certainly experience that I have as I go into my body. I feel a much more real, stable, secure, reliable sense of myself. And whatever the kind of esoteric and metaphysical things that are happening, at the end of the day, within our own solidity and sense of self, that is a place, it's a foundation where everything makes sense. And the invitation, kind of, if you're listening, you're thinking, well, what does that all mean? Is the invitation really is to allow yourself to dive into your body and just learn to find your own place and sense of self inside. And from my experience, it just makes everything in life make sense. Would you agree with that, Julie?
Yes, absolutely. It's such a huge piece, because if I give kind of an example, say I'm a child, or we're thinking of a child, and we are having an intense emotion, and we get information from those around us, from the majority of society, that is wrong, the way that you're experiencing it. So in our experience of that, even as an adult, if we think of it that way, if I'm having a powerful emotion that's really hard, it's a difficult emotion, maybe I'm scared, sad, whatever it is, maybe it's a really powerful emotion, and I'm telling myself in my own self-talk, oh my gosh, you shouldn't be thinking that, you shouldn't be feeling that, what's wrong with you? There's judgments around it. I'm expanding the pain and intensity of that emotion, rather than being able to say, okay, I'm acknowledging and validating that I'm having this. Okay, it makes sense that I feel this way. And suddenly, it's really powerful, because they've done some research around this. If you can start that process of acknowledging and validating, you're actually cutting the intensity of that emotion in half.
Wow. Right there. That's amazing. That's you know, that says it all right there. And you know, the thing about our feelings and our emotions is like, you know, we can control our thoughts to a certain extent. Well, we can control our, you know, we can't stop our thoughts, of course, but we can control what happens in our head to a certain extent. But when it comes to our feelings, we can't control our feelings. We can't dictate how we're going to be feeling from one moment to the next. Yes, of course, there are techniques and we can manage, and exactly what we're talking about here. You know, we can work to sort of process our feelings. But at the end of the day, our feelings and our emotional body is connected to something bigger and greater than ourselves. We're a part of an energetic flow of nature. And if we're going against that, if we're judging ourselves and saying, you know, I shouldn't be feeling like this, or I'm feeling like this, so I'm going to give myself a really hard time about it. We're putting ourselves up against like a sea. You know, we can't stop the way that we're feeling, and to judge it and put that level of control over it. It's not only, you know, unvalidating ourselves, if that's the right word, but it's almost trying to, you know, change the very nature of how we interact with the world around us. And I think there is this allowance and just this recognition and acknowledgement that we are emotional creatures, and we have to learn to acknowledge and validate that.
I love what you're saying, that it changes the nature of how we interact with the world. I mean, absolutely. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to change that nature, that we're deep feelers for a reason. And if we can remove that judgment, the weight of that judgment, and really believe in the validation process of our own experience, to be able to say, yeah, you know, I'm having a really intense emotion right now. Okay. It makes sense that I feel that way. I'm a deep feeler in the world, and I'm going to be impacted in these kinds of ways, and that's okay. And we soothe ourselves through that process. And because if we're doing that, if we can go into a self-soothing process rather than a judgment, imagine the gifts that we can go down inside of ourselves and get, right? And that's part of healthy development, both personal and professional. Because if I'm stuck in judgment, I'm certainly not going to be growing and developing personally or professionally, because I'm so stuck in that judgment. Don't you think, Willow?
Yeah, and that is exactly it. That's what all of this boils down to, is if we are not coming from a place of validation and coming from a place of a deep sense of self, then everything else in our lives isn't going to work properly. You know, it's almost like expecting a car that needs to go on a long distance over a desert or something, and only one of its cylinders is working, or one or two of its cylinders is working in the engine. You just can't expect it to function and do the job that it needs to do. And it's exactly the same with us. You know, almost putting aside the fact that we are highly sensitive and we have this trait, all human beings need to validate and to self-validate. For us, it's just that extra level of need, because we are easily affected when we're growing up, and it's easy for us to lose our sense of self. But what you're saying right there, Julie, this is fundamental. If we're going to be of service in the world, if we're going to be the right leaders, we're going to be the right service in our businesses and the communities around us, we must come from this personal place of knowing, a deep place of knowing, and trusting that moment to moment place is always there for us.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. And it spreads, like, you know, who decided that we were or were not supposed to feel a certain way? Because who decided that? The 80% that don't have our experience. So we need to sort of rise above and join together, as we've been doing in our community, in our conversations together, you and I, Willow. I mean, we are showing an example of, you are a deep feeler for a reason. This trait evolved for a reason. It's part of the survival of the population, and we cannot cover up who we really are. And instead, we need to support ourselves around those strong emotions. And that's where magic comes from that.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right, where the magic comes from. And I love how you've put that. It is another a level of validation in us validating ourselves and our community as highly sensitive people, and as people born with high sensory intelligence, and acknowledging and owning our place in the world. And the more we can do that, the more that we stick together as a community, and the more that we talk about it, the more open we are, the more we're sharing the fact that we are deep feelers, the fact that we are processing the world in a different way, and that we have these incredible values, and we have these wonderful gifts to bring in so many different aspects of life. That is another level of validation. It's helping us to bring our tribe of sensitivity into the world, and to let it shine and blossom and be there, and allow ourselves to be different and feel the way we are and celebrate it.
Yes, celebrate it. Absolutely. And I think about, if we are acknowledging our place in the world like that, imagine if we're matching, the fact that we are deep feelers, and we remove judgment. So we're accepting the fact that we're deep feelers. We're developing tools around supporting ourselves through those deep feelings. Now imagine if we can do that in such a way that helps us rise above as leaders, as sensitive leaders, that can take those deep feelings and turn them into something, rather than being blocked in judgment or stuck in judgment. What if we turn those into action, activism, change? I mean, I could go on and on about all the possibilities. It excites me. What do you think, Willow?
Yeah, absolutely. And you came up with something amazing recently, Julie, which was linked to, an inquiry, is deep feeling linked to change in the world? Is that a trigger? Is it a catalyst? And when we think about the great leaders and changes that we've seen throughout history that are known to have had the trait, Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, Princess Diana, Thomas Edison, I'm going to repeat myself, Martin Luther King, there is this incredible link within leadership, I think, where through the acknowledgement and validation of the fact that we feel deeply, I think when we really embrace that and understand that, it's from this need to want to create change. It's from this feeling, this amazing world around us, and wanting to do good. And when we really engage that and activate it, we create change. We enroll people around us. We inspire people around us, and it's what drives us. And I think you're really onto something in that deep feeling is a catalyst for change.
Yes. I mean, sometimes, and you must be, I don't know if you're like this. I constantly think about, like, when I'm watching someone excel in the world in some way, whether it's they're an entrepreneur or they're a leader in some way, I often see traits, the HSP traits in that person. And I study it, and I think about, like, okay, because I will always stand by this. I think there is brilliance in this population, and I think that we have supercomputer brains, and as soon as we can latch on to this kind of validation, to this kind of self-soothing of emotions, to use our tools around what we experience and then channel that energy, because it's powerful energy. What if we could channel that into the world in some way? And I think that deep feeling is absolutely linked to incredible change in the world.
Yeah, me too. And it's interesting, actually, because I realized just how much of my life experience, how much of my energy used to be put into self-criticism and questioning myself, thinking, oh, did I say that right, or did I do that right, or who's thinking about that, am I being rejected there? And like, so much of my kind of time and energy was put into that. And now, I consciously, that's shifted. The validation process in myself has fundamentally shifted that. And my thoughts and my focus isn't focused on that. Now I'm focused on, who am I? What am I here to do? How can I make a difference? And much of us, we all have something amazing to bring into the world. And I think when we learn to use our energy and use our focus to think about, what is it I'm here to do? How can I make a difference? How can I bring my gifts into the world? Well, all of a sudden, we're spending 80% of our time focused on that, rather than spending 80% confused in our minds and thinking, well, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? Have I just said the wrong thing to someone?
Oh, yes. I relate to that too. I mean, if we think of things like in energy points or percentages, I was doing the same thing. So much of my energy was going towards self-criticism and kicking myself when I was down already. And oh my gosh, that was like, I think about those years and how much I wasted so many energy points in self-criticism. And imagine if you were taking that 80% that you were using up for self-criticism and putting that into change, into following your passions, into soaring and flying in the world, because that's what happens. And I see people when they HSPs, when they start to connect those dots, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much fun to watch what they go and do. I mean, how maybe they start a business that they've always wanted to start. Maybe they start going out and making change, lobbying in some way, or it just excites me because it makes a difference. And when you put deep feelers into the world with that extra 80% of energy, imagine what kind of a world we can create with HSPs getting this kind of empowerment.
Yeah, exactly. It really excites me too. And I really believe that we are on the cusp of this. We're understanding it. There is a great deal of momentum in our global tribe of HSPs. We are starting to wake up. There are more and more coaches and consultants coming into the world that are helping us. We ourselves are coming into the world as coaches and consultants more. We are making this difference. And the way that we're geared, the way that we're designed, we are designed to do amazing things in the world. The fact that we are empathic, the fact that we have these incredible abilities in terms of high creativity and empathy and visionary abilities, we have an edge. We have this role to play in the world. And I think we're starting to wake up to that. And the piece of making this shift, I think, what I can remember before, when I used to spend all of my energy in criticism, it was because I didn't feel safe. I felt like I constantly had to do something about feeling safe. And actually the reality was that I was making myself the most unsafe I could possibly feel by constantly analyzing and criticizing myself. In the moment that I stopped doing that and realized that actually there's really nothing to worry about, I am safe, I am validated in who I am, and this is what I'm here to do, I immediately felt far more safe. And then everything else kind of made sense.
Oh my gosh, right? And we have to develop that within ourselves, and then we get to have that, walk around with that tool all the time. And what's fascinating about this is when you start to connect these kind of dots, and you're using your energy points for for other things, instead of self-criticism or judgment, you're opening up creative flow. Like that's one of the first things to go when you're under a lot of stress or you're having a lot of self-criticism, but it's also one of the first things to come back. And I love that process when somebody starts sharing that. It's like, oh, I feel that creativity coming back. And that excites me, because imagine if we're connecting those dots with the supercomputer brain of the HSP, with this incredibly enhanced creativity ability, with matching that with deep feelings. Because I want to talk about how deep feelings are a good thing when you're connecting it with those pieces, right?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Deep feelings are a good thing, and what's so great, you touched on it right there. I think this is another really, really key piece, and we're going to come into questions in just a moment, because I love the fact that you guys are all really active in the chat there. But it's, we are the movement of feeling through our body. It is an energy. It's connected with nature. It's something that's flowing through us. And when we are questioning that, when we're analyzing, when we're overthinking, we're blocking the flow. We're affecting the power and the connection that's coming through us. And when we just allow that flow to come through, we acknowledge, we validate those feelings, we're aligning ourselves up with a great resource within us, which is a deep feeling flow. And when we learn to engage that through validation, that's when we start to become of real use in the world.
Isn't it such a powerful shift to make, that to move away from the concept that deep feeling is a bad thing, and starting to recognize that it's actually a gift? Because I'm pretty sure it's our deep feeling selves that created, the programs that you and I have created, the way that we help the community. I'm pretty sure these came from deep feelings. I know for myself, it's like I understand on such a deep level what it's like to struggle and feel the challenges of this trade, and to be stuck in anxiety and depression and have my world just so stuck. And I also understand the process of getting out of that. And I think it's those, when I'm combining those deep feelings, I want to support HSP so much. And I think that we've had such amazing discussions in our podcast together, Willow, that I sure hope people are listening to all the episodes, because we've had such a great, so many good conversations. And yeah, maybe we can take a look at some of the wonderful chat that's going on, and answer any questions that come up. Do you want to start with one, Willow?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, just to acknowledge what you just said there, Julie. I love it. I feel just the same about this deep feeling piece. It's so empowering, and I really believe it's a source to a great deal for us, for us and the world. And yeah, and I love that, there are some great pieces coming through. I love where Diane, you just said it took years of therapy just to stop second guessing myself and to trust what I was thinking and feeling. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. Same for me. It was stopping the second guessing, and just, stopping those thoughts in their tracks. And sometimes I just say to my mind, stop, or silence to my head, and learning not to keep second guessing, and the trust builds, and gradually it becomes second nature to do that. So I love that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It builds, and you get better at it with practice. I totally agree with that. And Renata's saying, no wonder it feels so good to be kind to ourselves. Yeah, absolutely. Imagine the way that we can lift ourselves up in the world rather than pushing ourselves down. That the power of that is so exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Me too. It really is exciting, and it's, that's, I really believe that's why we're here. That's the gift that we've been given, and the more this validation happens on a global sense, the more we're going to be engaging this power. Yeah, it's wonderful. There's some
Yes.
fantastic pieces. Well, here we go. There's a question from Renata here. What practices are helping to nurture a deep place of knowing? You bring up a great point. There are some safe and not so safe environments. That's a really good question. What practices are helpful to nurture a deep place of knowing? So I've been really thinking about this, for Renata, over the last week or so, and on a day-to-day basis, I have to consciously embark on these practices, because otherwise I've got a really busy creative mind, and if I let it run itself, then I'd lose my sense of self. So
I have to laugh because I think as HSPs, we can relate to that. The busy creative mind. Absolutely. My partner calls my brain a Rubik's Cube.
yeah. If I let that run the show, it's a nightmare. So what especially in the morning, when I wake up in the morning, like the first thing I do is I go for a walk, then I come back and I do breath work, meditation, and I do some affirmations. And what that is actually doing is it's allowing me to get almost entrance back into my body after the night where it's kind of gone out of alignment for me. And what happens is I feel my conscious awareness actually sinking kind of down into my body, and I reconnect with myself. The mind quietens down, and I feel connected and focused, and I'm ready for the day. But what I have to do on an ongoing basis, I have to keep checking in, because then I'll get in front of my laptop and I'll get on the phone, I'll start doing things, and it starts to kind of come out of alignment again. And I consciously then have to dive in again. And I'm very clairsentient. So we tend to be clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. It's either visual, auditory, or feeling is where our kind of superpower lies. So for me, it's very much in my feeling. And I can see what my energy is doing internally, almost through my heart. It's a weird kind of thing. I'm not seeing the world I'm kind of seeing energetically, but I can look down and I can feel when I'm in this place of bodily connection. but I have to consciously choose to go there. And I do that by feeling the sensation of my hands and my feet. I do that with my breathing, and I consciously feel myself drop, and I look down into my kind of inner body to make sure I'm down there. But it's an ongoing practice. It's not something that I can forget about. It's a day-to-day thing, and it makes a huge difference to how I feel on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, I agree with you on that one. Before I even started talking, I wrote the word slow down. That's something that I have to do, is to make sure I'm slowing down. And that's where we recommend that 2 hours a day at minimum, and 1 full day off a week of really time that allows us to do that deep connecting time. And meditation is a great one for HSPs to practice, because it has ability to slow down. And it's something that you need to practice, like building a muscle. You get better at it with practice. And for me, I pay attention to body cues. Like, my body definitely tells me when I'm in sync with it and when I'm not in sync with it. So when you keep practicing it on a daily basis, like you were saying, Willow, that you get better at it, and you get better at recognizing your cues. I think pay attention to, like, when you're feeling really good and connected, what were you doing right before that? When you're getting disconnected from yourself, where did you notice it started? So you're starting to kind of build a roadmap to get to know your own patterns and experiences. So that was a great question. Any other thoughts on that, Willow, before we move on to the next question?
No, I did, but I I just forgot actually what I was going to say there. I had to my microphone. We just had to plug something in. No, I think you covered it. I think yes, it's the signs. I get the signs too. Like, if I've been really embedded into my laptop, then everything just starts to rise up, and then I feel this kind of weird anxiety, and I go for a walk, and then it all just drops back in again. So it's an ongoing practice.
Yeah, ongoing, and keep practicing. And the fact that you're here listening, participating, I mean, you're already rising above most people, and that's a big thing. And Nush says, why people usually don't understand us either. They're always ask us to stop being sensitive. And, I like to say that, yeah, people, 80% of the population who don't have this trait don't understand the experience that we experience. And we can't really expect them to understand it. They have a different experience. We even have brain differences. I mean, we really do experience the world in a different way. And those of us that score high, like on my sensitivity scale, even then can experience a different experience than people that score lower. So it's spectrum too. So the really highly sensitive on a very high scale, we definitely, and I think a lot of us have found each other, that, our experience is different. And so we need to, when communicating with somebody without this trait, we can educate them, but we can't really hold on to the expectation that they're going to completely understand our experience. So that's why that's where the validation of our own experience becomes very important, right?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree, and it's a really good question. And what I found is that there's a route through this, I found, by reframing what this sensitive piece really means. Because the reason that we are so good at what we do, and the reason we have these abilities as HSPs, is because we're sensitive. And if we think about that word, we have this is why I coined the term high sensory intelligence, is because we have an extra level of perception, and that gives us very key abilities. So for instance, when I'm facilitating people and I'm initiating HSPs into an understanding of their gifts and abilities, there's all sorts of things happening in me energetically. I can feel what's happening in the person I'm facilitating. I'm getting messages coming through, and there is this process that's happening. And that's because, and I'm putting my fingers in the air in like inverted commas, of my sensitivity. It's not a sensitivity, it's a sensory intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are flip sides of that. So it means that, yes, I feel things very deeply. I have to get more rest. And, I take things to heart when people say things to me. So there's two sides of the coin of sensitivity. But if we focus on the bad bits, or we focus on the things that people say to us, why are you so sensitive all the time? It's like, well, I have to be sensitive because I have this incredible superpower that I'm bringing into the world. And sometimes it's challenging, but fundamentally it's there for something very, very important. And I think that reframe is really critical.
Oh, I love that. Looking at it as a, discussing it as a sensory intelligence, that you have to take care of that. And because you're taking in so much information, you're going to need more downtime and more rest. I actually was watching this show the other day, and it was about this trauma surgeon, and it was kind of incredible to me because I think he was an HSP, this character that he was playing, and he was like saying, you know like they were getting, some of the people, other doctors and stuff, were getting annoyed with him because he wasn't like jumping into every case and diving in and exhausting himself. And so he finally said, my job here is to be the best I can be at being a trauma surgeon. And if I need to rest, if I need to take a nap, if I need to give myself space and energy and time and rest, then that makes me better at doing what I need to do. And I was like, yes, this concept needs to be talked about more often, that we don't have to, in fact, it's not serving the world to just deplete ourselves constantly, because you will lose access to all those amazing superpowers that come with this trait if you're depleted. And that means, part of being a leader in the world, a healer in the world, somebody that wants to make a difference, that really means that we have to take care of ourselves in a way that works for us. Not that what works for other people, but works for us. And then we get to access all that beautiful sensory intelligence that comes with this trait.
Yeah, wow, that's just brilliant. What a fantastic example. That's just a perfect example of validation. What you were saying about the surgeon there is like, he is deeply self-validating himself. It's like, I know my ability, I know what I'm here to do, and it means I'm going to have particular needs. It means I'm going to behave and act in a certain way, but fundamentally, I am here to do great work as a surgeon, and that's the point. And if other things happen around me, well, so what? If he was to say, oh, actually, I think I better just people please for a minute and make that person feel good about themselves, or I better go and do this, or, oh no, I'm going to overwork so I don't let anyone down. He's a surgeon. He can't do that. He has to look after himself, and he has to be in alignment with his needs. And it's the same for us. We have to be the surgeons in our lives. We have to recognize and understand that we all bring these amazing gifts. And if that means that we need to come out of a busy situation for a while, or we have to say no to someone, we have to put up boundaries and look after our needs, that is all part of what it means to bring this incredible gift into the world.
Yes. And that brings, you're sort of like you're setting up a roadmap for that magic to happen. And if you are caring for yourself in a particular way, and I see like Diane and Nancy are talking about that concept of needing more rest and more downtime, and that we need to get rid of that guilt, because guilt is also an energy sucker. It takes away energy, and it's always the last to go. And I still remember this feeling, because I grew up like my dad was like, you need to be doing something all the time. And it was like, if I wanted to have some downtime or rest, I almost felt like I had to do it secretly so he wouldn't find out about it. And that set up a lifetime of overworking. And so I still have to change that default setting. And I know as HSPs, we get really involved in our projects. And I know you and I, Willow, have talked about this. We're so deeply involved in something. It's like we have to force ourselves to step away from it and and be able to take care of ourselves in a way that allows that magic to occur. So you're like funneling that energy down this journey on the magic happening.
Yeah, wonderfully put. That's right. Yeah, it is funneling that energy, to create the magic. I love that, how you put that perfectly there. Yeah, and it's and it's interesting because it's these patterns that we have and these habits, and I have similar things. I also feel guilty too when I rest. I think, oh, there's something else I could do. Do I allow myself to do that? And it's like, we just have to kind of learn to, for me, it's been about integrating these things. It's not about expecting all of these things to stop, or getting disappointed when repeated things happen, or perhaps we're practicing on something that really rears its head in some way and we have a real breakdown in some way. It's allowing and integrating these patterns and things that we have from our conditioning. And the more that we integrate and validate our feelings, acknowledge our feelings, they do begin to lose their power. But I think it's important never to lose heart, when it feels like sometimes we really get overwhelmed by something that we think, oh, I just don't want that to be there anymore. Do you get that too, Julian?
Oh, yes. And this is the power of what we're talking about today, the power of validation, and just using that example of the surgeon, because imagine if he's validating his own experience and he walks into that surgery where his skills are needed and they need to be so strong. I certainly would want an HSP trauma therapist who, doctor who was rested and had the magic at the end of his fingertips like that, versus, somebody that's not validating their needs and completely depleted walking into that surgery. I mean, we can use that as an example, that is the experience at the end of that, and the reason why we need to validate our own needs and our own experiences, keep talking about this, spreading this information, all of it. And I hope that if you guys are finding these episodes helpful, please share them with other HSPs, because I think we're going to create a movement. I think we've already started it, Willow.
You have?
Right?
We have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so wonderful that, all you guys are contributing as you are in the chat. I love the conversations that you're having here. And if there's anyone that we haven't managed to get to this week, please do reach out to us. You can always write us a question and we can address it in another episode, or, Julian and I will chat to you, no problem at all. And also, it's wonderful if you can subscribe. Not subscribe, but to rate the podcast, you were saying, Julie, because that helps to spread the word. Is that right?
Yes. If you can leave a rating for the podcast, we're really appreciative of that. That helps other HSPs find it. And we really hope that you are sharing it and leaving the reviews. You can go to hsppodcast.com and check out show notes for all of our episodes. You have bios about me and Willow. We have the link to leave a review, all of it. So that's a great place to go for that. And thank you, Sensitive Empowerment Community, for your wonderful, I just love when you show up during these podcast episodes that we're doing in the community. And I think you make it even more special, sharing your experiences with us and asking questions. And I love it. And I'm so proud of everybody who's listening right now, because everybody that is listening is somebody that is showing up in the world, making intentional steps to grow, to connect, to become empowered. And I think that is such an exciting, powerful thing. And we keep lifting each other up in the world. And that really excites me, because if we're lifting up in the world, imagine what we're capable of together. Imagine what we're capable of individually. It's very exciting.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. And I really acknowledge our courage too. And, and the wonderful work that we're all doing by lifting each other up and, and working with our feelings of self-developing. It is an act of courage. It's an incredible act of self-love. We're right at the coalface right now, doing what we can to become the best that we can as HSPs in the world. And it takes a great deal of courage. I just really acknowledge all the amazing work that all you guys are doing on a personal level, and your commitment to be on these calls and to be contributing and supporting each other. So thank you so much for your wonderful input.
Yes, thank you so much. And put your questions for us. You can leave us questions in the comments of these episodes also. So thank you, Willow. Thank you for I just have such a good time talking with you and sharing our love of this trait and the sensory intelligence and all the possibilities that are there for HSPs in the world. And it excites me that we're a part of helping to lift other people up in the world. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here and listening and sharing your part, just sharing yourselves with us in the world. It's such a beautiful thing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
Yes, we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye for now.
You can take my free sensitivity quiz and find all my HSP tools and resources at sensitiveconnection.com.
To register for the next masterclass on how to make your shift into high sensory intelligence, visit inluminance.com. Please leave us a voice message if you have a question or comment for us to be included in a future episode. Just click the voice message button in the show notes, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and record up to 60 seconds. We love hearing from you.
And please share this episode to help others. And take extra good care of yourself out there. Bye-bye, everybody.